Hello everyone, it's Dave Bredhauer. Thanks for joining me today. We're going to be using my favorite die, the flowering Christmas tree. It's got a lot of detail to it, and I want to show you a couple tips to help make your project a success. When I designed this die, I wanted to make it as intricate as I possibly could. For this particular project, I'm going to be using the die to cut out two separate pieces of paper because I want to layer them together. I'll take elements from the red and put it on the green. So first I'll start by cutting the green piece and then the red. Now since it's such an intricate die, I found it's helpful if you add a shim of cardstock underneath your cutting plate. So I'll just put that in there on my Big Shot, then put my green piece of cardstock down, followed by the Christmas tree die. Get that centered in the middle, put the top plate on, and run it through. Notice I'm not using any tape to hold it in place. It's not going to shift around too much. Sometimes you might need to run it through a couple times if it doesn't seem to go and cut completely through your cardstock. But a paper shim or two should be enough. And you can see it cut through nicely. I'm going to hold it in place while I use my fingers to carefully bend around the edge of the cut. Notice that I'm not pulling too hard. I'm just wiggling the paper so that it slowly releases from the outside. All those little bits and pieces on the Christmas tree die can break off, so you have to be careful. Once you have the outer portion trimmed out, you'll need to start working on the inside. There's pieces that need to be knocked out of the middle around those stems and branches. And again, you have to carefully wiggle them out, just bend back and forth, trying not to damage any of the intricate vines of the flowering Christmas tree. Take your time while you're removing the extra pieces. It'll be worth it in the end. This die turns out great. If you have any stubborn pieces that don't want to come out, you might try a needle tool to help push those pieces out of the way. But I use my fingers, just a little patience, and everything seems to work okay. Once you have the excess cardstock removed, carefully bend everything back into place. Try to flatten it out as best you can. Next, you're going to cut another flowering Christmas tree, but this time out of red cardstock. Position it in the middle. And don't forget that you need a paper shim underneath to make everything tight. Put the top plate on and send it through. Depending on your particular machine, you may need an extra shim, and as a reminder, you might need to just send this through a couple times, but I've had good luck with mine cutting out nicely on the first pass. Lift my die off, and you can see it cut really well on the red cardstock, so well that it stuck to the plate a little bit. So I have to carefully peel it up so it stays in one piece. Now it's time to remove the excess inner pieces once again. You'll notice on different cardstocks, some of these remove easier than others. For example, on this red cardstock, the pieces practically fall out. You might try putting a piece of waxed paper between your die and your cardstock to help ease this process. But as you can see, some cardstocks cut beautifully on their own without any extra help. The next step on the project is to cut out the red flowers that are going to layer onto the green tree. I like to use the sharpest, tiniest scissors that I have. These particular scissors are made by Judikins. These tiny detail scissors are great for jobs like this. You can see it cuts to the tiniest little areas. Once I've got all of the flowers cut out that I need, I'm going to start putting glue on the green tree and then carefully putting the matching flower over that green area. I'll do it one at a time, carefully positioning things and letting the wet glue help me to glide the flower in place. I'm using a white glue just because I want to move things around a little bit it's such a tiny area, it's hard to get it in the right spot with my fingers. So I'll put it on there, and I'll go from flower to flower, carefully trimming things out. And notice that I try to cut the flowers so they have a nice little point to them, so it follows the contour of the green tree below it. Use my finger to help move things around. And I'm saving some of those pieces of the red, maybe for other projects. Nice little branches. Just a tiny little dab of glue. And again, as carefully as you can, line that up and put the flower right on top of the green area. Be sure and adjust any other flowers that have shifted while you're putting things in place. The glue's wet, so you have time to fix things. Now it's time to add some embellishments. I'm going to use some crystal jewels here, nice red color, for the centers of my flowers. Again, I'm using some very sharp, tiny detailed scissors to cut between all of the jewels. Now, I'm going to use the same scissors to pick up and place each jewel directly in the center of each flower. The adhesive on the bottom of each jewel is enough to hold it in place. Now I prefer to use these scissors to help me place my jewels and embellishments onto my projects, but some of you might do better using a cutting tool or a needle tool to pick up and place the jewel. Whatever works best for you is fine. Now once you put a jewel in the center of each flower, you should take a look at the tree and see if there's any place else that you can put some jewels. Just keep adding embellishments until you're satisfied with the design. Now I'm using a parchment note card and I'm ready to mount the tree. I'm going to turn it over and I'm going to use my white glue again. A lot of you have asked what's the best way to adhere something as detailed as this to a card. I haven't found a perfect solution, but I do like to use this craft glue. Just add a little dot here and there. Try to get all the spaces that I can so that it stays pretty flat on the project. I like to use a white glue that dries clear, just in case some of it spreads after you've pushed it down onto the project. I'm going to carefully lift it up, try not to get my fingers into the glue, get it centered, and then carefully press everything into place. The branches, the flowers should all be pressed down so that they stick to the card. I'm going to use my hands, but you can use a paperweight or a book to hold things in place until it's dry. Here you can see up close, the vines are well secured to the card. Once everything has dried, it's now time to add a little bit more embellishment. When I created the die, I designed it so that there could be little berries at the end of leaves and stems and anywhere else, maybe in the center of flowers, including the small ones and the big ones. Now I mounted this on a plain card because as you see, it's complex enough it doesn't need a lot going on behind it. There's some other variations. Here I did one using some aqua colors. The vines are a nice deep lagoon color, and the flowers a bright white. Notice the centers are dots of liquid pearls dusted with glitter. And here's one more variation I wanted to share with you, a tone-on-tone version of the Christmas tree. A cream-colored Christmas tree is placed upon a slightly darker cream-textured background. I'm going to be using our Charlotte border die to create one of the layers for this card. I'm going to secure it with Scotch tape to a piece of eggshell cardstock that's 4 inches wide and 5.5 inches tall. Making sure that it's held in place securely right along the edge, I tape it down and put my plate on top. And I'll send it through the Big Shot machine to cut out the intricate edge. There are a lot of little pieces to cut out with this Charlotte border die, so you may need to shim it so that it cuts perfectly along the edge. Carefully remove it from the cardstock. Turn the cardstock layer around, getting all the excess pieces off of your cutting plate. And put the die on the other side. lining it up so it's parallel to the edge. Leave the tape in place so that you can secure it again and sandwich with the top plate. Run it through the big shot again so that the opposite edge gets cut out. You can use any of our border dies to create this look, but I really like this Charlotte border for all the fine detail that you get, and I think it complements the flowering Christmas tree really well. Carefully peel the die off of the cardstock, then use your fingers or a needle tool to get any pieces that haven't come out of the holes. So now it's time to start assembling the layers. We're going to have a cranberry note card, the eggshell layer that we just created with the Charlotte border, and a piece of textured cream cardstock. I'm going to use my ATG gun to put some adhesive on the back of each layer. I want to make sure I get right near the edge on each side of the layers. Now you'll pick it up and flip it over and center it perfectly in the middle of the eggshell layer so that each side of the border shows nicely. Line up the ends and flatten it out. Now it's time to put some adhesive on back of the eggshell layer. You don't want to put any adhesive over the holes where the Charlotte border is cut because you don't want any adhesive to show through. So put it just inside that border. Pick that up, flip it over, and center it right in the middle of the cranberry card so that a little bit of that cranberry color shows through the holes of the border. I've already die cut a cream colored flowering Christmas tree, so now it's time to get that centered and placed in the middle of the card. I'm going to use some white glue again, putting a tiny dot on each portion of the design. I'll put some glue wherever there's an area big enough to hold a dot of it, on the back of flowers, leaves, berries, anywhere that I think is big enough that the glue will maintain a hold to the layer. Then I'm going to carefully turn it over without getting my fingers in the glue and center it right in the middle of the layer and carefully press it out. There may be some portions that are lifted up off the card. That's okay, adds a little dimension. Be sure and add some jewels to this project too. Notice how different the red jewels look on the white flowers compared with our first project. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I hope you have just as much fun with the flowering Christmas tree die as I did.